Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday of Faith in Our Hometown, our weekly conversation about things that should matter to us, I think, as people of faith in the greater Joplin area. If you're starting your countdown to Christmas, whatever, we were 4 days from Christmas. So as we do our preparations for Christmas, I think one of the things that all of us as people of faith should be doing is searching our hearts for how we deal with the world and the things that are happening in our world. This morning, our conversation will be maybe a bit controversial for some of you who are watching. I hope not too controversial, but it's good to ask ourselves, do we have to be doing all the things that we do, and should we be doing all the things that we do as a society? And the issue we're going to try to tackle a little bit this morning is the death penalty. Is that one of those things that we should be doing? It's legal, but is it right? Should we be doing it? What should that be about? My guest this morning is going to be Donna Walmsley, who is with Missourians with Alternatives to the Death Penalty. So stick around after this Mercy Minute, and we'll be right back to talk about that.
Blessings and greetings of mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand and expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
Well, again, thanks for being with us for another Sunday morning at Faith in Our Hometown. As I mentioned before the break, my guest this morning is Donna Walmsley. Donna comes to us from Springfield. She's the chapter leader for Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And so, Donna, thank you for making the drive and joining us this morning. I try to get some of our local folks to talk about this, but this is a little kind of a controversial issue here in our area. And sometimes some of our local ministers are just saying, like, oh, they get upset when I talk about that. And that is my own experience as well. When I start talking about other social issues, people nod and say, that's right, Father, you go. When I start talking sometimes about the death penalty, I can always tell because there's a few people that'll cross their arms and they'll look at me like, we don't much like the sounds you're making. So why do you belong to Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and why do you want to see something else done, perhaps, other than what right now is part of the law of the state of Missouri?
I joined the Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty about 20 years ago, and it was the result of my viewing the movie Dead Man Walking.
Okay.
And I was probably in my 50s then, and frankly, up to that time, the death penalty was not a big issue to me. I had never really thought about it because I didn't think it affected me personally. It was something that was there, but I never thought much about it until that movie, and it really hit me at that time that this was an issue that not only affected the person being executed and the victim of the crime and the families on both ends, but that it affected a lot more people. There were a lot more victims in society as a result of the death penalty, and for some reason I felt that this was an issue that I needed to become personally involved in.
Yeah, let me say something a little bit about it. If you're not familiar with the film, it's a film about the life of Sister Helen Prejean, who is a Catholic sister. You just saw that Mercy Minute about the Mercy Sisters. But she, was working in New Orleans and doing her ministry. And at one point in time, somebody just asked her to go start visiting a prisoner who was on death row, and maybe she'd write some letters. And pretty soon, she was involved in this thing up to her neck. And as she would say, and she talks with a little Cajun accent, which I just think is great. If you ever get a chance to see her, I would go. She's very entertaining. But she'd say, here I am. She said, how did I wind up being the poster child for anti-death penalty. She said, God's got a funny way of working. She says it in her nice little Cajun accent, so it's interesting. But the movie's still out. You can get it on your streaming services or any of that stuff. But it is kind of a fascinating way about it. She changed her life. So you kind of echoed that in a way, because suddenly she wasn't involved either and suddenly got involved.
Yes, yeah. Exactly so.
So what was it about that changed that for you, that changed your perspective, that said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to go from knowing it's there, but saying, wait a minute, this is personal to me, and how am I going to fix this?
It hit me that it was a pro-life issue, which I don't know that a lot of our churches in the past have really considered it a pro-life issue, but it obviously is. And so I began to realize, at least,
excuse me,
that it was immoral that we kill our own Missouri residents when there's no reason to do so. I've talked to legislators, I've talked to other people and asked them, what good is the death penalty in Missouri? What good comes out of it? And people give me answers, well, it's a deterrent, it keeps other people from even thinking about violent crime, about murder. And the more that I learned about the death penalty, apart from just the immorality of it, I found out that it was a very failed public policy, that many people do not really understand much about the death penalty. People think that it is a deterrent, but there really are no credible studies that indicate that. And the states that have the death penalty, Missouri is one of 29 states in the U.S. that has the death penalty, even though only about 6 of those states actually use it, because they are finding. Yes, we are. We are one of the biggest. We have the most executions. Texas, of course, is number 1. And they're still at it, even though most executing states have backed off. Texas has not.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now you use an interesting term, Donna, and you say that in your opinion it's immoral. Mm-hmm. Now you're going to have to unpack that a little bit for some of our viewers, because some of them would say, well, why is it immoral? I mean, we voted it in, and we didn't vote it in, but I mean, we said that we wanted it, and our legislators listened, and it's there. And the courts have found it to be legal. Why do you call it an immoral issue?
Well, first of all, I would have to say that just because something is legal doesn't necessarily mean that it's moral. And then I would say that all life is sacred. It doesn't depend on what a person does, but it's because who a person is. And people of faith, I think, if they really think about it, they would understand that this public policy that we have that doesn't protect us, doesn't make us any safer, why do we do it if it serves no purpose other than possibly vengeance?
Okay, so say some more about that. So you're saying that in your viewpoint, the states that use it are really not experiencing any deterrent to the death penalty from what you can see or what's been measured.
Oh yeah, from what's been measured, because the states that have the death penalty, which are mostly states in the South and in the Midwest, and it's interesting, this is an interesting aside, but most of these states also have a long history of lynching behavior that is actually being looked into now in some of the areas in Springfield. We just dedicated a couple weeks ago a lynching memorial to the 3 men who were lynched in 1906 on Park Central Square. Mm-hmm. And what is happening is society, we're looking at that all throughout our country and seeing that this needs to be taught in our schools. This needs to be understood so that we can get over this mentality that we cannot solve social problems, especially social problems that involve violence, by using more violence.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
I mean, I personally have long been critical of our rush to do some of that here in the state of Missouri. And I mean, anybody that's listened to me preach or whenever executions come around, I personally am not in favor myself, because I just don't think you can teach anybody that life is sacred or that killing is wrong by killing somebody. Again, whether it's legal or not, that just for me is one of those arguments that I just have never been able to make any sense of it. How am I going to teach somebody that you shouldn't kill people? So whether it's the state that's doing it or whether or not it was somebody doing it in a back alley somewhere, it's still not right. You can't, if you're going to take the position that life is sacred and that only God's kind of in charge of that, how do you justify doing that from that vantage point? Which is again, sometimes an unpopular viewpoint, here in our area, but certainly one that I would want everybody to examine or look at least certainly the people that I preach to, in terms of some of that.
I'd like to add something to what you just said, because part of the problem that a lot of us have with the death penalty is that it takes away the perpetrator's possibility of really doing something in her or his life to turn around a little bit. A lot of these violent crimes were not premeditated. They were done based on rage at the moment. And the other issue is a lot of the perpetrators, I think I read a study that it's something in the 80% range, they have some degree of mental illness. Yeah. And so, it's not only the individual's issue, it is a societal issue that there's so many things in society that we should be doing to take care of one another that we don't, and then when something happens, we don't take the responsibility ourselves, we blame that person. And this is, the death penalty is an example of that. It makes a good scapegoat when there's a lot of issues in society that we need to address. We need to address mental health treatment. We need to address poverty. We need to address a lot of these issues that would make us, these are the issues that would make us safer, not killing the guilty person.
Yeah, and we're talking about in cases of, where guilt certainly seems to be, the case. After the break, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that in many cases we also don't have the right people and some of those other things that we want to talk about in the break. But my guest this morning is Donna Walmsley. Donna is with Missourians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. We do have a small chapter here in our own area as well, but Donna was kind of coming from Springfield and talk with us a little bit this morning. So we're going to be right back after a quick break. Don't go away, and we'll be right back with Donna soon.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, was that soon enough for you? At any rate, again, my guest this morning, Donna Walmsley. We're talking about the death penalty and whether or not we think it's a good idea for us as a state. And again, it's a controversial issue. Some people are going to land in different places. Before the break, we were talking about the fact that even in a case where guilt is pretty, apparent and very easy to see and judge, that even that is, we don't necessarily always agree that that's the right approach, to take that. But the other thing that bothers me about the way the death penalty is applied and the number of mistakes that have been made, nationally is really pretty amazing. The death penalty many times is applied to people who are in lower socioeconomic brackets, usually applied in many cases to people of color. Yes. All those things make it much more likely that some of those folks are going to be given a death penalty sentence than other people. And again, you look at that and you go, is that fair? Is that, so we've got some problems in the way this whole thing's applied too, do we not?
We have a lot of problems. You were talking about people of color receiving death sentences much more readily than white people do. And also it depends on the victim. If the murder victim is white, there's a much more likely possibility that the prosecutor will seek the death penalty. And there's been a number of studies done throughout the country on that issue. And of course, it's the prosecutor. The prosecutor is the most powerful elected official in the county. And it's the prosecutor's choice whether or not the death penalty will be sought. And this opens up another can of worms, because if a county, say in Missouri, a very poor county, the prosecutor is not going to seek the death penalty because there's not enough funds to do this. The death penalty is very, very, very expensive. And so, in fact, we have been trying for years to get the Missouri legislature to do an audit of the death penalty, because it is a public policy, even though, and this is another issue, a lot of it is done in secret, even getting the execution drugs. But we've been trying to get this audit so we could get an idea of how much more it costs Missouri taxpayers to pay for a capital murder case where the death penalty is sought than a capital murder case where the death penalty is not being sought. We have not had that study in Missouri, but other states
found
really close to us here in Oklahoma. I just read not too long ago, they had done a study in 2017. They've learned that it costs I think it was 3.2 times as much money to prosecute and carry out a death penalty case, if the prosecutor seeks a death penalty, than life without parole case.
Well, and that's because of the amount of appeals that have to be done, and they have to automatically be done.
That's right.
Because again, I think this is part of society's desire to really believe that they've done due diligence, so that they can really truly wash their hands of saying, yes, we know this is just, yes, we know this is the right thing. But really, I'm not for having sociopaths on our streets. But to me, I've always liked the argument, and I've actually tried to get some of our own local legislators to look at that, to say, wouldn't it just be cheaper if we just said, life with no parole, But the other thing that bothers me about that is that how many cases have we had where after the fact, we've discovered that the people we executed were actually innocent, because something else comes along, new evidence, new things that come along, and then suddenly these people that we've executed, what do we say, whoops, sorry, when it's the ultimate penalty for a crime?
Yes.
And then later find out that the person was innocent anyway? And yet we look at each other and say, oh, well, we did our best. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know that we did do our best. And I'm not so sure that even though the legal process did what it was, quote, supposed to do, the justice was really served in those regards. That always bothers me. Especially every time I read about another one where somebody was exonerated because of new evidence. It frightens me.
I think the figure is something like 166, maybe it's a little more now, of cases where people have been, this is throughout the country, not Missouri.
Not Missouri, right.
Throughout the country, where people have been exonerated. Some of these people have been on death row 30 or more years before it's
DNA testing,
and it's usually
and some of
with
those
DNA
things.
testing, and sometimes it's universities, it's the Innocence Project. Different groups will take on these cases because there's a lot of evidence that they did not, the perpetrator, alleged perpetrator did not commit the crime. One of the problems is there's so much politics in this policy as well. And when you're talking about a person's life, politics should not enter into whether a person lives or dies.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that we have with the prosecutors. Sometimes it is to their benefit to prosecute a death penalty case, especially if maybe they're up for election the next year or two and they want to be perceived as tough on crime.
Yeah.
This is an issue that is it's a difficult issue, but it is definitely a part of the entire problems with the system.
So what about the issue of, so you got the innocence question. What about the issue of being for vengeance? Why is that such a bad thing, or why does that offend you? In terms of that, you mentioned that it's just like, well, if we're doing it for no other reason other than vengeance. What's wrong with vengeance?
Well,
It's a rhetorical question, but go ahead.
Should we base our laws on vengeance? Should we base our public policy on vengeance? Public policy is supposed to be to protect people, to enhance our lives as fellow citizens, as fellow human beings. Vengeance, I see no place for vengeance in any type of public policy.
Yeah, and it's again, I think sometimes people confuse justice with vengeance, and I really do believe that sometimes is the case. Of course, we have laws that just say, okay, you shouldn't steal from somebody else, and if you do, then there's going to be this penalty. Because in justice, it seems like that should not happen. But the same thing would be true in terms of capital murder cases and those kinds of things. People shouldn't do those things. And so, if indeed, and the Catholic Church took this position a long time ago, if that was the only way that you could really protect society,
Yes.
then the thinking was at that point in time that, okay, then you can do that. If that seems to be the only way that you can protect society and keep murder from happening, is to threaten people with the fact that you'll encounter the same thing.
It's kind of a lesser of two evils thing
Right.
here.
So it was there, but recent thinking has kind of closed that loophole, if you want, that basically said, well, okay, we could do that if that were the only way that we could protect society was by enacting a law that could do that. But the more contemporary thinking basically says, but that's not necessary anymore. It's not been shown conclusively that it is a deterrent, and because it's not necessarily a deterrent, does not seem to be doing the effect. And there are other ways of keeping society safe, keeping people off the streets, keeping them locked up, doing those kinds of things. Because of those things, the thinking has slowly changed over the years to say, okay, we just don't know that it should be allowable at all.
There was a study in which a number of police chiefs throughout the country participated, and they were asked to rate a number of policies that they thought would be most effective in reducing violent crime and in the best ways to use taxpayers' money. And out of this huge list of policies, the death penalty came out last. The community policing, more education, more mental health services, education, all of these other issues came out much higher than death penalty. Even our law enforcement see that, what good does it do?
Yeah. I have not spoken to our own local police chiefs or anything, but it is interesting to see that at least in the national poll, that it comes out that way. Yeah, I mean, I guess it'd be one thing if I really thought that it was doing any good, but to me it just seems to be trying to to solve an evil with another kind of evil, even if it's a social evil, even if it's a legal evil. I just can't see that taking life is a good thing in any way, shape, or form.
Our world is going in the opposite direction than at least a number of states in the United States are. But more and more states are looking at repeal. We have Western Europe. If you are a member of the European Union, you cannot have the death penalty. South America, none of the South American countries have it.
Yeah.
So
we got a bunch of those rebels here in our area that say, who cares what those other people are doing? But I'd rather make the argument that says what's right's right and what's not right ought not be right, rather than whatever everybody else is doing. My mother had that whole thing about, well, if your friend jumps off the bridge, are you going to jump off the bridge? No, I'm not going to go there. We're going to be right back.
But they have good reasons for doing what they're doing.
Amen. Well, thanks. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute.
The whole purpose of screening is to catch people who have a significant smoking history early enough where we can do something about it and potentially improve the duration of life. The minimum recommendation for screening is 30-pack years. So usually people who've smoked more than 30-pack years are the ones that we're screening. If we start screening yearly with low-dose CT scans, we can reduce the risk of death from lung cancer by 20 to 25%. Stage 1, 2, and 3 cancers potentially can be cured. When it becomes stage 4, the possibility of cure falls significantly.
Well, this morning we tried to tackle a difficult issue. And that is the issue of the death penalty. It's interesting to me that the state has now kind of gotten back into the business again. Just recently we had another execution, and there'd been a long period of time where we hadn't gone there. But it seems like we're back in the business again, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to raise the issue again for us to think about and to debate publicly. Obviously, we can disagree with each other, but I do think it is a matter of a moral conscience of who we are as people of the state of Missouri to figure out whether or not we want this as part of this. I personally don't like my tax dollars going to injecting poison into another human being. Even if they've done something horrible, I'd rather keep them in prison and keep them off the streets. But I have an issue with killing them for killing somebody else. To me, that just is one of those things that causes me some questions. I hope we'll at least stir around the questions for you. Let's continue to talk to each other and support each other. Join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.